So you've wrote a beautiful intro to your track, a nice build-up, but now everything you write as a climax sounds either boring or too chaotic. How the hell can you write a trailer climax that makes sense and sounds epic? Well, we're gonna answer that today. Hey, what's up, friend? This is Alex, and today we're gonna talk about how to compose trailer music. Specifically, we're gonna see how I composed the climax of this track, which, spoiler alert, was my first ever singing attempt. So the climax sounds something like this. So that's the part we're going to analyze today, the climax and the outro. In this series of videos on how to compose trailer music, we talked in the first part about how I wrote the intro. Then we talked about how to go from an intro to a build-up that makes people even more interested to listen to the track. But today we're going to talk about how to get that full and epic and mind-blowing trailer sound without getting lost or without getting too chaotic or too predictable. Now, this, as you heard, this is a bit of a particular climax where you have my vocals. The structure is a bit particular as well and everything. So not every trailer climax is born equal, There's many ways in which you can write a climax. So today I'm not gonna give you a specific subset of rules like, hey, use string ostinatos and use bass trombone or whatever. It's not like that. Today we're gonna talk about the mindset and the principles I followed to get this sound when I composed this song, which means this video is going to be very long. In which case, if you don't have time to spend 1 hour learning about trailer music, but you still want to learn something, I recommend you to check out the rest of my YouTube tutorial channel. You're going to find 20 minutes, 10 minutes videos that explain a very specific subject in a very concise way. So you can learn, there must be 100 videos on my channel right now from which you can learn. So in that case, check out the other videos. I'm going to leave in the description of the video a playlist to all the fundamental videos that people love the most from this channel. So you can check those out. But if you want to learn about trailer climaxes and how to write a stinger that sounds mind-blowing, you may want to stay tuned and watch the rest of this video. The other thing I should mention is that this is part 3 of a series. If you didn't check out part 1 and part 2 yet, I recommend you to go back and check those parts before, because there are some things I mentioned in those first few episodes that I'm not going to mention now again. So I'm going to leave a link to part 1 and 2 in the description of this video as well. Now, what we're going to see is mostly how I went about getting that huge and full sound, which is the main character trait of the trailer climaxes. In short, a trailer climax is usually like the selling point of a trailer track. The intro and the build-up are the intro and build-up to the trailer climax. That's the point you want to arrive to. And it's usually the bit of the song that gets used in the climax of the trailer, which is the part of the trailer where things really start to go to shit, or you have that emotional development unfolding for real. Usually at the 1 minute and a half mark, stuff like that. That's where people go like, I need to watch this movie. And usually in the montage, that's where the strongest scenes are. And your music needs to complement those scenes, or even bring even more value, make them even more intense. That means your song in that bit needs to be expressive, powerful, and clear, and huge. It really, like pop music, when you listen to pop music, you cannot resist the urge to sing along because it's tangible, it's clear what it's trying to say to you. Hey, be cheerful, sing along. And it's written in a way that just communicates that in a very tangible way. Trailer music needs to be the same, not necessarily in the way that you need to make people happy, because sometimes you need to write something that sounds epic, scary, ominous, or emotional. But it needs to follow the same idea into the mindset of this song, when listened to by people, needs to make people understand on a very tangible level the emotions that I want them to witness or to have. So you need to write in a way that is mind-blowing, that gets in your bones, but is also clear, People who write climaxes and don't know better usually tend to do one or two mistakes. Either they write something that sounds weak, doesn't sound huge enough, doesn't sound full enough, doesn't sound powerful enough, doesn't sound like it leaves too much space that has too much holes. Either they do that, or they try to write something that sounds incredible and mind-blowing, but they do it in a way where they put all the things that they can put in the track. Even if they don't make sense together, they put them because they want to feel the culmination of the chaos, and they think that chaos is what people are after. That is blatantly wrong as well. That's the second approach, and it's wrong. What people want is clarity, but a clarity is so strong that it blinds you. It blinds you, you know? So it's not chaos, the thing you're after. You're after something, a very clear message that is so overwhelming that anyone can get that. They listen to the song and they just get sad, or they feel happy, they feel hopeful, they feel something. Everyone feels the same thing because you've wrote the song in a way that presents that idea in a very tangible way. So how can you achieve clarity? Well, you do that by writing something simple. Now, you might be like, what the hell, Alex? What you wrote, what I just heard is not simple. It actually is. It's not a complex orchestration. And to show you that, I'm going to show you the piano sketch of this song. And it sounds very basic, like something that anyone with a bit of music knowledge can write. And it sounds like this on piano. Like this, it's like, well, it's a basic piano here, nothing too crazy, right? This is very simple. What I'm doing is that I'm taking from that simple idea and I'm just orchestrating it, you know? It's literally the same thing, but it's just orchestrated and produced in a way that is gonna make it sound huge. What we're gonna see in this tutorial is how I achieved that, but now I should say that many of the things we're gonna look at are things already mentioned in other tutorials. For example, the idea of going from this to that is something I explained in the tutorial how to orchestrate a chord progression, which is like 1 hour long. So if you checked out that tutorial, you might see me say some things I already said there. If you didn't check out that tutorial, I recommend you to watch it after this one because it's gonna, give you more clarity on some things. But so here are the main things, like the 3 main ideas that I follow to go from here, like the piano, to that you just heard, is first, having hugeness. That's something you achieve by taking this, and this is, by the way, you can split it in 4 parts. So in this tutorial, I'm gonna refer to 4 parts. When I say 4 parts, I'm meaning these guys. So the main part is this. Na 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 na. That melody there, that's the main melody there. The second part is this. Na 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 na. That thing is another motif. I have a main melody, a counter melody, which are in the first part. In the second part, I have that motif. In the third part, I have some chords going on. And in the fourth part, I just have the bass line. These 4 parts are the leading forces, I would say, or they're the thing on which I base this whole orchestration. All the different instruments here are playing either 1 or 2 of those parts. No instrument is doing something out of that, except for the percussion, which are doing their own thing. I didn't include the rhythm in the piano sketch, but for the percussion, I just have this going on, which is the same thing we had in the build-up, by the way. So, 4 parts plus percussion. Let's see how I went about creating each one of those parts. Let's start with the climax first. So in the climax, let's see how I managed to create the bass line, or to orchestrate the bass line. The idea... Sorry, before that, I want to say the other 2 things. Sorry. So one thing you need to have is hugeness, and you do that by taking these 4 parts and orchestrating them in a way that gives you something with this frequency response. Very huge, no holes in it. It has lots of low end, lots of high end, lots of mid range, everything, and it has a certain balance. You achieve that by distributing those notes throughout the span of different instruments with different timbre, making each one play in its own timbre, so that when you add them up together, you get that shape in the frequency response. That's something I explain in many of my tutorials, by the way. The second thing you want is power, and you give power to your track, of course, by using percussion and trader hits and trader effects and everything. Like these guys that you hear, for example, in the singer. they give a lot of power to the track. So you can do that by using your layer, percussion, trader hits, and the reverse sounds and whatever, risers. We're going to see a bit about that later, but we already discussed that. So hugeness by having a large frequency response, power by having big percussion and big trailer effects, risers and whatever. And you also bring power to the track by using loads of short articulations over the long articulations, as we're going to see. Another thing I did is I used quite a bit of reverb. This is only the reverb, and as you see, it's like this massive wave of sound which washes over the whole track. Now, you don't need to use so much reverb in your track. Actually, using too much reverb can be a mistake. But in this case, this is a track which is a bit sci-fi, so I wanted to represent a sense of space and vastity of the universe. So that's why I used lots of reverb like that. And it's very subtle though. When you hear it in the track, you might not notice it, but it's just this wave of sound that makes the track a bit more atmospheric on the whole, and that creates a bigger, it makes it a bit huge. And the other thing I did to get this trailer sound is of course mastering the track. This is something I didn't talk about in my tutorials yet, like mastering. But this is what the track sounds without mastering. And this is with mastering. So the first impression is that, wow, when you activate mastering, the song sounds more powerful, louder. And louder is the right term. Now, in this case, I did multiple things. We have an equalizer, an exciter, some compressors, an imager, and a limiter. So there's many things happening here. What I'm doing is I have the song, which sounds good even without mastering, but then I'm shaping it, I'm gluing it, and I'm making it louder, So that's what I'm doing pretty much here with my mastering. And trailer music sounds impressively loud also because of the way it's mastered. It's usually very compressed, which means it has a very small delta, a small difference between the loudest parts and the quiet parts. Usually that's what mastering does. If this is your loud part and this is your quiet part, mastering reduces the difference between the two. So the quiet parts start to become way louder, and overall your track is going to sound more powerful because of it. But it's also going to have less contrast. Eventually, I will make a tutorial series about mastering because it's a pretty deep subject. But you can get around by using maybe isotope ozone 7, isotope ozone 8, or ultra maximizer by waves, and just either playing with the presets or trying it yourself to make your track sound louder. But I'm going to make tutorials about that, and also you will find lots of tutorials about that already on the internet. So again, hugeness with orchestration, power with big percussion, trailer effects and all those things, reverb and mastering. That's what I did here. Now let's check out, in this tutorial we're going to check out specifically what I did to orchestrate this into the orchestration you just heard. So let's go part by part, starting with the bass line. Now much of the orchestration here in the climax is very similar to the one we analyzed in the previous episode for the build-up. So I'm not gonna, spend time fretting over details as much. But let's see what changed. So here we have the bass voice, which is being played first by the string sub, which wasn't present in the build-up, this sub here. This guy is from Juggernaut. It's a patch I made. It's just this basic sub with loads of attack and release. Decay and sustain. That's how you get that sort of sound there. And I also, I think, applied some sound goodizer over it, but it's a very basic shape, and a wavetable and whatever. Other than that, we have this sub playing some sustain notes. Other than that, we have the bass trombones doing the same thing they did in the build-up, which is playing some notes from the bass line, but they're also harmonizing them. Like the tubas are playing the bass line, the trombones are playing the bass line and harmonizing them with these notes here. Now, that's something cool I did. Like, as I told you, I just took these main ideas, like these 4 parts, and I distributed them throughout my orchestration. But that doesn't mean that I took this note, copy-pasted it on string ensemble, took this, copy-pasted it on bass trombone and everything. I took this and I arranged it for bass trombone. Sometimes by adding a detail on top of that. So in this case, the bass trombone are playing those notes, and the tubas as well, but they are not playing them in a sustained way. They're playing them with marcatos like ba 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 ba. So still that idea, but written in a specific way. Other than that, they have this harmonization going on here on the higher voice of the bass trombone. Then I did something similar in the cellos. The cellos are doing this. Sorry, got lost here. The cellos are doing this. Now in this case, the cellos, one layer is from Jaeger, the other is from Fluid Shorts, and they're doing two parts. They're doing the ba 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 motif, but they're also playing the bass note. And you notice a pam 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 pam, which is the same thing we had in the beginning, in the build-up as well. So I'm creating accents with the velocities, and I'm bringing a bit of low end with the cellos. So let's leave them there. And what else is? I think that's all the instruments I used for the bass. Oh yeah, I also used some arpeggi here, like the low arpeggi. So when you put them together, sorry. This is like the low end. And I forgot one thing, sorry. I did add some Brahms to represent the low end bass line as well, to represent the bass line part, and it does this. So this Brahms, like this sound here, which has 3 layers, which we already analyzed in the previous tutorials. What I'm doing here is I'm changing the note that it plays. That's something very cool you can do. Like when you use one-shot samples like this, like Brahms, don't think that you have to necessarily use one note only. You can, I did copies of it, and I changed the pitch to match the bass line. So I'm using the Brahms not only as a one-shot sample, but as an actual instrument. And they're layering, like they pretty much are layers for the brass. And yeah, all of this together, the Brahms, the bass trombone, and tuba, the string sub, and the cello spiccatos, and the arpeggi are playing the bass line. Of course, there's also some voices in the cellos which are playing the motif. So again, I'm not only doing one part on one instrument family or one instrument group might do 2 parts at the same time, but the idea is that they're following the map that we defined with the sketch. And the overall frequency response for the bass line ends up being like this, which is very overwhelmingly large, especially in the low end, even without the percussion going on. So that's a beautiful way to portray your bass line. Now, one thing you might notice is that, oh, I forgot, I also have some, nothing, sorry. One thing you might notice is that I'm doing pretty much the same notes on every instrument almost, but every instrument is playing them in a different way. So we have the string sub, which is playing like sustained notes. Then you have the trombones, which are playing, trombones and tubas, which are playing marcatos. And then you have cellos, which are playing spiccatos. And then you have this arpeggio, which is like playing spiccatos as well, if you will. But it's a bit different sort of notes. And yeah, and the Brahms, which are like super like distorted and screechy marcatos. So each one of these instruments is doing something very similar to each other, but each one is bringing something different to the table. The cellos are bringing like that incisive spiccato notes, and the Brahms and brass are bringing that initial marcato and everything. And that's a cool thing you can do, That's, you take one idea and you represent it on different instruments in slightly different ways to get an overall signal that represents that range of notes in a very big and bold way. That's how I orchestrated the bass line. Now let's check out how I orchestrated the chords instead. Now for the chords, I think I have some going on in the string ensemble here. These chords here. Then I also have this high voice here, which is playing that, again, the string motif, which is being played in this other layer as well. So the strings here, they're from Cinematic Strings 2, and they're playing those chords. Now, other than that, I also have some harmonies going on in my pads here. And in the organ as well. And there's one layer of organs which are playing that motif as well. Then, these pads here. Now, all these sustain pads and sustain strings and everything, when you hear the orchestration, they are not in the front. Let me remove my voice here. They're not in the front. The things that are in the front are actually the string spiccatos and the brass and a bit of the, the melodic stuff. But the sustains, you almost don't notice them. And that's a cool thing, because in climaxes or in the parts that I want to sound aggressive, I will try to keep the incisive elements in the front. So I keep the spiccatos and the marcatos and the short elements and the percussion in the front, and leave the sustain elements, like the pads and the string ensemble chords or whatever, in the background. Because if you do the opposite, where you have the sustain elements in the foreground, then sustain elements tend to have an atmospheric connotation. And if those are the loudest in your track, then your track will sound more atmospheric than powerful. In the contrary, if you have them in the background and you have the short elements in the front, your track will sound way more incisive. The climax, I want it to sound powerful. I want it to sound huge, sound big, and sound punchy. That's why I leave the short elements in the front. And this sounds like a stupid detail, and you're like, why the hell did I even click on this video if these are the tips that Alice is going to give me? But really, this thing is the difference between night and day, in a trailer song. I heard so many songs where people write beautiful spiccatos, but then they have string sustains that overtake those spiccatos. And the spiccatos will not stand out because there will be way less contrast between the moments of silence and the moments where the spiccatos play. Because in the moments of silence, you're going to hear the sustains very loudly. It's like having someone speaking a very important message, but as that person is giving the speech, someone else is being like, ah. So the message doesn't really come through over the guy saying, ah. That's not very good. So you don't want anyone saying, ah, while you speak. You want the background elements and the things that are not that much important, not that much, they're not the most important thing in the arrangement. You want them to be in the back. In this case, the sustains, it's good to have them in the back because, again, they create the sense of density, with the reverb and everything. They define the harmonies more. They make the track sound fuller. They reduce the holes in the frequency spectrum. So it's a good idea to have those sustains, because if you check out their frequency spectrum, they are pretty, useful. They glue everything together. But if you have to have them, let them be quiet. Like this. And one thing, of course, I'm doing is that on these strings, sustains, I have my, dynamics going on, which, gives them that moving quality to them. Just like in the rest of the track, by the way. So that's, I think, what I'm doing for the chords. Nothing too complex. I have something harmonic going on in the violas as well. This is a bit to enforce certain notes in the harmonies and to create more, they're both like spiccatos, so they're incisive, but they're also harmonic because they are not playing a melody. They do not represent any of the main motif or main melodies. They're actually harmonizing over the motif, as we're going to see now. But yeah, that's what I'm doing for the chords. I think nothing else. Now let's see what I did for the motif. Now, the motif, like the bam, 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 bam thing, comes as a consequence of this build-up I have here, of this like variation at the end of the build-up. Because if you remember, in this part, the strings are already playing, and they're playing in a very proud way, kind of, and loud, but they're playing a different thing. Now, since this build-up is directly linked to the climax, and since the climax is not hugely different from the build-up, I wanted to at least have some difference in a few instruments, especially the ones in the front. here in the build-up, this thing here is one of the main elements. So if I kept it going the same way in the climax, you would have been like, well, this is just a build-up again, you know, nothing has changed. So what I did is I did this as I showed you in the previous episode, and then I use this as a way to link these two parts. So after this, I was like, let's transform this like motif into something else, and that's where this other motif came from. Now let's check out what instruments are playing that motif. As we saw before, the cello is playing it over the bass notes. The violas are not playing it, I think. The violins are playing it. And it's like Jaeger and Metropolis are together. I wanted to show you this bit because now a repetition will come in, and before the repetition, I did this other thing. So this is the pattern it follows. You know, it goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down. Here it's down and it goes up. I didn't do, you know, copy paste again. And as I showed you in the build-up tutorial, you want to have variations. That makes your melodies way more interesting, and it also just forces you to think of your melodies in a more evolving manner. So after I did here, I felt like I needed to justify this. You know, now I need to do something else. What I did is not something else. I just added that. You know, I just played that pattern or motif on a higher octave in the second repetition here to make it feel like it's evolving. And then here, there's the outro coming in. But yeah, the violins are playing that, cellos are playing that, the violas are just harmonizing with it. Then another instrument which is playing this motif is the arpeggio here. There's actually two arpeggios going on. This one, which is from Nexus, has some delay over it and stuff like that. And this other is from Nexus as well. One is on a higher octave, the other is lower, and the lower one has these triple triplets, or you know, three notes here, which makes it more rhythmic. But yeah, they're just providing that motif, and I'm playing that motif on such high instruments because the instruments that, you know, with a higher timbre are usually the ones that stand out the most. So when you want your melodies or your motif to stand out in a cluttered orchestration like this one, they need to be on a high octave or a high timbre. And then other than that, we finally have the melodic aspect of the thing. And this is where it gets embarrassing because this is my first ever singing attempt. For the melodic aspect, when I wrote the track, I have a video where I composed this track entirely from scratch. Actually, it's like 3 videos, 6 hours long in total, I think, which are available. The first part is available on my YouTube channel for free, and the other 2 parts are available on my Patreon channel for those who support me there. And in that video, when I was composing this track, I was like, okay, guys, I have an idea for the climax. I want to write, I don't know, a guitar solo, but since I'm not that great at guitar, it would have, like, my first idea was I'm gonna sing this solo with my voice and record it like this, and then later on, I'm gonna record it on guitar without recording the process, because it's gonna take, like, without recording it on video, because it would have taken me an insane amount of time. So I wrote this melody here, and I sang that melody in the video. It sounds like this. Which is, it's a bit fucked, to be honest. But eventually I was like, well, even though I sing terribly, I did like the expression or the character of what I sang. So I just left the vocals as they are. Now, for these vocals, there's a lot of processing going on. If I remove all the effects from my vocals, they sound like this. But basically, the idea was to have one leading melody and then a counter melody that harmonizes it, just like in the sketch. I actually wrote this vocal before writing the sketch, to be honest. Yeah, one thing you notice is that you have that thing I always mention, like the tension and stuff like that. Like here, before the second repetition, I end up like, nah, and you feel like, okay, that he's like charging for something, like, nah, nah. Yeah, that's what happens later in the second part where I go wild. So each sentence here in this melody ends on a tense note because I want to carry this climax forwards. What I wanted to do here was to link this climax to the stinger straight away, so that's why I wrote the melody in that way. And I think that shows in the string motif as well. Other than my vocals, since I thought like my vocals are not powerful enough really, they are too clean and my voice sucks. So I was like, I need to add something else to it. So what I did is I layered it with this. Which is a sound from Nexus. It's like this, you know. If I remove all the reverb and all the effects from it, this is what it sounds like. But with loads of Valhalla shimmer, you get that sort of super spacey effect. So that's what I have going on here. And I think I did the same thing with the piano. So we put them all together with my voice. Sounds like this. And you see it stays on the higher timbre. Other than that, the French horn is also accompanying the voice at a certain bit. So the French horn is both playing harmonies, which I forgot to show you before, but also playing a bit of the vocal line. So if you check out the French horn on its own, in the intro, in the first part of the climax, it sounds like this. Which should accompany the bass trombone. But then in this part, this happens. So it's a na 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 na, just like my vocals, right? So I'm even there. I'm accompanying the vocals. So yeah, the melodic part is being played by a bit of the French horn, a bit of my vocals, a bit of piano. And that's how the climax came to be. Now, all these things represent the idea we had there, and all these things have the same accents. The accents are being dictated by how I wrote this percussive pattern. And you're gonna see, whenever the trailer hits come in, you just hear, like, you just hear everything playing more boldly. Like when the trailer hits come in, you have the brass and the Bram doing the marcatos. You know, or you have me playing na. That's very subtle, but that's the accents I used. So you can say 4 parts, like these 4 parts are very distinct. Each one is doing something different, but they all link up together nicely because of the accents I laid down with my rhythmic foundation and with my trailer hits. And that's a beautiful way in which everything goes full circle. So you start with a simple idea, you present that idea in different ways on different instruments. Again, as I showed you with the cellos is doing spiccatos, the brass is doing marcatos, and the arpeggio is doing another thing, and the sub bass is doing sustains, and my voice is doing sustains, but we have a pluck doing pluck notes and piano. So it's the basic idea being presented in different ways on the span of different timbres, and each main idea, like the bass line had a full frequency response, the A melodic line had a big frequency response as well, no low end, but mostly like in the high end and stuff like that. The harmonic voice had a very broad frequency response in the mids, and the motif there, like da 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 da, had a high frequency response as well. So each one resides in a specific area, and when you put them together, they don't clash as much. The only ones that are clashing a bit in this mix are the melodic voice and the strings motif, because they kind of reside a bit in the same range. But the others leave space for the other as well. And the percussion instead is playing overall on the whole range. So if you check out the percussion on their own, they're mostly playing in the low range and the high range, but they have a bit of mids as well. And that's what you want, because if you have an orchestration that is huge and distributed and your percussion only play in the low range, you're not going to hear them. They're not going to be hearable in their mix. And I cannot show you an example here because every layer is, because they're layered. But if I had this track and I didn't layer my percussion so much, like as I showed you in the previous tutorials, my percussion here have something like, 5 layers of percussion and trailer hits with like 3 layers each and whatever. So that's why they're so layered, because they need to match up to the 4 orchestral parts, which were written in a way that is huge because I want to get the full trailer sound. So that's how you get the full trailer sound. Now let's see how I wrote the stinger. The stinger is the second biggest selling point of the track, and it's the part after the climax where things go really insane for like 3 seconds. In this case, the stinger is not that much insane, but it sounds more intense than the rest of the track, and it sounds like this. Now, the stingers are usually the most powerful parts of the track. Oh, and there's also this bit. Because that's usually the part where things start to go in unison, They go in unison, and that's where you go the loudest. That's where you really have no limits. So the first thing you notice in this stinger is that the trailer side of things, the fifth part, the percussion, the trailer effects, and the braams and everything, sounds way more insane than in the rest of the track. This does so much, and it doesn't sound like it, but it really does. So we have this reverse sounds doing stutters. And as I explained in the build-up tutorial, this just raises the tension. Then we have these trailer hits. And percussion, which are way more aggressive than the rest in the rest of the track, because they do faster rhythms like zoom, 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 zoom. That sort of sense of power, that sort of rhythm, we didn't have it throughout the span of the track here. It was pretty linear on the climax and build up, but here is where we start to go really rhythmic and aggressive. And that's a beautiful bit in which you can do that. When you do the stingers, people usually do the mistake of having a climax that sounds full and everything, and then in the stinger, they take away everything they wrote. Maybe they remove all the, they use a smaller orchestra or whatever, but the biggest mistake I see them do is removing the percussion. Sometimes they really they have, okay, in this part I need to go as big as possible, and they remove the percussion pattern. What you want to do is to take the percussion pattern to the same level of intensity it was in the climax and bring it up a notch. And you can do that by rewriting it or by using loads of trailer hits, or rewriting it and using loads of trailer hits at the same time. And then below that, you want to add, your risers and stuff to make the tension increase. Another thing that helps with the stinger is, stutters. Another thing that these stutters tell us, though, is that what we're doing here is using repetition quite a lot. I'm not, in the climax or in the build-up, trying to build a magnificent melody. I'm doing repetitions, like nah, da 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 da, that thing there. And as I do those repetitions, something else needs to change. So the idea behind the stinger is this: having an element that leads the track forward, something that goes something that rises in intensity, of course. That's one thing you need. So you can rise in intensity by using risers or using a melody that goes up. But while you have that melody going up, a cool thing you can do is to have repetition in some bits. So the drums here are, quite repetitive. Another part that is repetitive is of course the bass, the brass. Sorry. Now in this case, the brass is repetitive in the pattern it's following. The pam 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 pam. It's always note, something like that. Now in this case, I'm making it go up because, as I told you, some things is good if they're repetitive. Other things is good if they go up. If you can do the same, like if you do two things at the same time, having a repetitive pattern, but then making your orchestration, go up in terms of notes, that's the best. And that's what I'm doing here with the French horn. But I think the bass trombones are doing the same note, probably. I don't remember. I wrote this track so much time ago. So the bass note is staying the same. And then the harmonizing note here is going up. So that's what I'm doing in the brass. The strings are doing this. So that's going to be interesting to watch and to analyze, I guess. So you see, pam, 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 pam. So I have repetition, but then in this bit, I go up. So try to have like the balance between repetition and going up. Again, here the same. This is where it has a bit of variation, but then it goes back to and then here it goes up. So it's all about that game there. And then there's no there's one technique to write stingers, but you need to play with these two forces, repetition and evolution, in a way that you just write something that sounds like a stinger. It's so weird to explain, but you see that going on in every single instrument. And then there's my vocals, which are clearly the leading part, like the leading bit in this part. And in the stinger, they go like this. And that's clearly a build-up. Like there's one voice which is like na 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 na, but the other one is like no. Fuck. I cannot sing, but you heard it now. Like I was in the zone when I sang this, but now I'm not. But it's like super expressive and super like tormented, and you feel the energy build up, and it's like there. So when you put all of that together, you have some repetition and some variation, and things going up all together. You get this. And that's not the note in which you can end. Like it leaves an open, an open question mark, kind of. And that's where I resolved with this. Just a random way to resolve the track. But yeah, this part follows the same principles that we shared here in the climax. We have, many timbres doing maybe the same thing, but in its own way, many instruments on different timbres or whatever. And that's pretty much how you get the trailer sound. Like, it's not like you need necessarily to use ostinatos. Like, these ideas that I showed you here can be applied with any instrumentation. So if you're writing an electronic sound design trailer track, which means a track without strings, without brass and whatever, you can still apply the same mindset you have here. You might want to use synthesizers and bass and drones and whatever instead of strings, but you still need to have something that doesn't leave any holes in the frequency spectrum, doesn't leave too many holes in the arrangement. You don't want to have rests in the climax and stingers, moments where your leading element rests and nothing else comes up. If you have a melody that rests in your climax, you always want to have something that is going to fill the rest. You don't want moments of silence in your climax. You don't. So in any genre, like in sound design trailer music, that's even more accentuated. It feels like so much is happening, but the reason why sound design trailer music sounds the way it does and energetic in the way it does and everything is this. Like it's made in a way to feel like it's always full. And to show you an example of what, I don't know, sound design trailer music might sound like, let's take one demo I wrote for our library once. This one. Like I'm gonna just play the final part. Like you literally have no moments to breathe. You have no moments of pause in between and whatever. But in the intro and in the build-up, you do have those. Well, a bit. Even in the moments of silence, you have sounds like this guy here. Like a pa-pa-pa-pum there, you know. But you still have some moments where you have, you know, it's not as intense. While here in the climax, it's just, you know, full-on aggression. And that's what you want. You know, if you're writing sound design trailer music, you want that. If you're writing orchestral trailer music, you want that. You always want your track to be full. Like I just showed you. And that needs to be even more intense in the stinger. Now, if you're having issues with writing a stinger that sounds more, you know, more powerful than the climax, a cool thing you can do is to refer to the climax and start your stinger at the same level of intensity you had in the beginning of your climax, and finish your stinger at the same level of intensity you had at the end of the climax. Now you might say, well, I'm just going to rewrite the climax again. No, you're not, because the stinger needs to be like 3 or 5 seconds long or something like that. Can be even a bit longer, but if it's like 5 seconds, that's the ideal. And the climax maybe might be like 20 seconds long. So if I'm telling you, go from point A to point B, which should take you 20 seconds, but do it in 5 seconds, that means you need to have a much faster build-up, which on the whole is going to sound way more intense. So that's, you know, one thing you can do if you struggle with stingers. But eventually, like, it's just going to become easy. You just need to have repetition, and it needs to go up as well. While in the climax, you present the melodic idea and the main motif and everything in a bold way, huge way. In the stinger, you present just like aggression and power repetition, and you make the track go up in a bold way still, but you don't need to have melodic context. You don't need to have chords and stuff necessarily. You can even go unison on one single note, but do it in a way that is like insane. Of course, you can also make stingers with beautiful chords and everything. As long as they sound like they're evolving and they sound super intense, then they're a great stinger. Anyway, this is it for the explanation about how to write climaxes and stingers. It was a bit of a weird explanation in a way. I didn't give you like the techniques like, hey, use strings ostinatos and you'll get a trailer stinger. Because, you know, the way in which you compose has to lend itself to the genre of music you're trying to make, to the emotions you're trying to represent. And trailer music is just one wave of music, but there's like uplifting trailer music, there's sad trailer music, emotional, there's aggressive, there's thriller, there's sound design, there's many types. So I try to keep this tutorial as universal as possible. And also, as I showed you, this climax is a bit particular. So that's why I went a bit in the mindset more than the, hey, use this articulation, you know? But this is surely not the last tutorial I will make about trailer music, because my friends at Trailer Music Academy just released a course with Daniel Babum, which is like one of my favorite composers of all, and he's also a friend of mine. Super great. And it's a course that talks about how he composes trailer music. This guy went about making the music for trailers such as like War of the Planet of the Apes a few years ago, and many more. Like, he did so many trailers and wrote so many mind-blowing trailer tracks. And the good thing is that he made this course now where he analyzes his music that made it into trailers and explains his technique, his approach, how he orchestrated it, how he did the sound design, and all the mindset behind his arrangements. So I just got the course and I'm going to dive headfirst into it, and I'm sure you're going to learn lots of stuff and incorporate that in my music. And some of the things I'm going to discover, I'm going to make a few tutorials about. But mostly, what I think I recommend you to do is to get the course yourself if you're interested in learning more about this genre. Especially if you already took the Evelyn course and you want to learn even more from someone else's perspective. The Evelyn course was on Christian Bacik, and the Trainer Music Academy course, like Trainer Music Mastery, is from Daniel Babum, a whole different perspective. It can be very useful, and many people who took the course already said it's a mind-blowing one, so I recommend it to you. You can find the link to get the course in the description of this video, and if you use the coupon code AlexMoukala, you're gonna get 5% off of your purchase. And I'm sure you're gonna talk about the course way more in the future, maybe make an interview with Daniel, and write some tracks based on what I learned from the course, so surely you're gonna see way more tutorials from my part about trainer music in the future. But for now, that was the final part of this track, which I might publish later on this week on YouTube, along with the stems and the project files. So that is all for this video. I hope it helped you out. If it did, share it with a friend and leave me a comment so I know what kind of impact I had on you. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them. I will usually reply, especially in the first few hours that the video has been out. So that's all for this video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.